Hans, my dear friend, do you also want to become a traveler?
I already travel a lot to the Tasty Oktoberfest, for example.
No, I mean a traveler in time and space and between galaxies.
Is there also beer included?
No, there's no beer included, but a phone booth and a screwdriver.
Well then, no. But here is the review for the 10th episode of Star Trek Picard from the German perspective.
And now, the final form of power. This is the Sci-Fi News Video Review. With your hosts, Daniel and Jens.
Hey guys, thank you so much for joining us for the German perspective, the review for the season finale of Star Trek Picard entitled Farewell. I know I only have one thing to say. Hans, get the Flammenwerfer! Well, take it away.
Yeah, the finale of the second season of Star Trek Picard is the expected consequence of the last 6 episodes. The great resolution, which many still hoped for, which will bring everything together in a great way, does not exist. Quite the opposite. Instead of at least telling the still open storylines to a reasonable end, this time they also rely on great symbolism and unnecessary guest appearances. Picard and his entourage have traveled back in time to ensure that the super important Europa mission takes place, an event of immense importance. Without this trip, there will be no depictive future, no Starfleet, no Federation. Unfortunately, the writers didn't even begin to convey to me as a viewer that this mission has any significance. A few phrases from fortune cookies that Admiral Picard fires in Renee's direction were enough to get her self-doubts and worries out of the way. In this episode, about 6 minutes are invested to show the predictable end of Talon and the start of the Europa mission. Does anyone actually know why Talon looked like Laris? We then learn from Guinan in an aside that Renee is bringing an organism back to Earth that will help dealing with the crisis of our modern times. Again, an example of how the creators of the show have no desire to tell their own stories. No mood either for Brent Spiner, who seems bored in the last 3 episodes, but frustration seems to be a source of evil intentions, at least for the character Sung. Because after his attempts at sabotage fail, he still has a cruel secret plan in his top drawer. Khan. Again and again, the authors use these cheap tricks of throwing some big buzzwords without any plausible context into the room. And it's exactly the same ending as in the Federation, in the Enterprise episode, in the final Enterprise episode, The Augments, when Dr. Eric Sung draws his first plans for an android in the last scene. The same pattern is served by the absolutely unnecessary appearance of Will Wheaton. And it's explained to us here is the species of Tau Alpha C known as the Travelers and Gary 7 from the original series somehow belong to the same species, or at least pursue the same goal. Again, this is purely an end in itself to explain the supposedly big connections, which in reality brings out the whole lack of talent of these writers. What Corey has to do with all this, I don't know. An absolutely pointless scene. Permanent name-dropping, painting references to old Star Trek episodes on facets or garbage cans, or constant repeating of a nostalgic soundbite doesn't save anything in the end. It seems like a desperate attempt to present always new distractions in order to move the viewer with all means, just not with good stories to keep watching. Franz, was there anything good and plausible for you in this episode?
Well, I have to say, this season and Star Trek Picard in its entirety is so bad it's almost impressive, I have to say. As a sequel to The Next Generation, with Patrick Stewart reprising his role as Jean-Luc Picard, plus 7 of 9, one of the most beloved characters from Voyager. How could they possibly screw that up? But well, they did. And I'd like to quote a scene now from the finale where Talon says her last words to Picard. All the secrets we keep, all the reasons we never tell someone we love them, they are worthless. Sweet Picard, your guilt must have saved planets by now, countless lives in trade for the one you couldn't. I got to tell her, maybe she will remember me and know that she was worth all of it. You helped me give that to her. This is what Talon says to Picard. And if you think about it, so Picard saved countless planets and whole civilizations, not because he was the better, the more evolved human in the role of a captain, not because he represented the basic idea of Star Trek for decades. No, quite the opposite. He didn't save the Baku because it was the right thing to do, and because he fought for the principles of a better world. No, he didn't defeat the Borg because he believed in teamwork and the preservation of the future. No, he didn't fight for the life of his dear friend Data because it was morally so important. No. This has changed. He acted completely focused on himself out of a perceived guilt. This is the new story of Captain Jean-Luc Picard. Because, as the second season Star Trek Picard tells it, he was in fact not one bit better than us. A weak, a fearful man who was only able to accomplish great things out of the trauma of his childhood. What a disgrace! What a dismantling not only of the character Picard, but of everything. Everything Star Trek has always stood for. It really disgusts me. This makes Star Trek Picard without a doubt the worst Star Trek series, regardless of any single slightly entertaining episode in season 1 or 2. Simply because it is not a Star Trek series anymore. Even more, it dismantles what has always been the quintessence of Trek. While one or another episode of the second season may still have been entertaining, they all of them obviously pursue only this goal, to dismantle the character of Picard. And this, for me, it's an insult to the legacy of one of the best television series and characters of all time. In The Next Generation, violence was always the very last resort. This continued well into the later seasons of Voyager. Do you remember how Captain Janeway desperately tried to bring peace to the Delta Quadrant by means of a conference between the Kazon leaders, even though there was a much easier way to achieve her goal? That was a hopeful future, in which empathic, enlightened people would negotiate, debate, or otherwise wiggle out of dangerous situations. Picard, on the other hand, is full of shootouts, clumsy and poorly choreographed fight scenes, and blunt, needless violence. But Hans, how do you like the portrayal of Picard in this season?
Now, perhaps let's move on to Picard and the big emotional goodbye. We've talked a lot in the last few weeks about the obviously intentional dismantling of the character Picard, as well as a wasted potential to tell a really meaningful story with Q. In the last episode, the two are treated to another dialogue, and the viewer is given a less than plausible explanation as to why Q staged all of this. Picard is simply Q's favorite. He wants to prevent his old companion, Jean-Luc, from spending his remaining years lonely and abandoned. That should be the big explanation for Q's motivation. And how does that fit? That fit with the events shown that Q first wanted to stop René Picard from the Europa mission himself, and then later orders Sung to do it? Why did he give Corey the cure? Why the creation of this alternate timeline, only to be embraced by Jean-Luc? Do not have to die alone, just to have the certainty that others will remember him positively after his own death? It all seems so incredibly constructed and far-fetched, and of course, it doesn't fit to the Q from TNG, and it doesn't even fit to the Q from the second episode of this season. Picard should accept his fate, accept himself as the man he is. But exactly this we had already seen in the TNG episode Tapestry. Q impressively demonstrates to Picard what positive influence even questionable behavior and dramatic events in the past can have to the development of a personality. The viewer should seriously be thought that after this lesson, Picard never dealt with the events from his childhood, the same parable with the same characters, but conveying two different messages? I don't get it, sorry. There's a sentence, one sentence in the dialogue between Picard and Q that, with some interpretation, sums up everything that completes the dismantling of the character of Picard. Q says pretty much at the end, "You are now unshackled from the past." The past has given us viewers so many great stories that it has created so many magical moments for so many fans. You finally released yourself from the past, mon capitaine. Look, you dear old Star Trek fans, even Jean-Luc has sworn of the old. Don't bother us anymore with your critics, with the comparisons, with the doubts. There's no way back. The old Star Trek is dead, finally. Dead are also the Borg, who now book themselves into the main event of the Federation as guardians of the transwarp tunnel. That Jurati and the Borg Queen has certainly surprised no one. And the resolution of this story around the, as always in new Star Trek series, galaxy-threatening anomaly is dealt with as quickly as the launch of the rocket to the Jupiter moon Europa. The second season, especially after the third episode, was marked by massive plot holes, wasted potential, a lot of unanswered questions, and especially by an incompetent storytelling. I rate these 10 episodes as a total, for me personally, even worse than the first season. And I would not have thought this is possible. Yeah? I think the quality is even worse than any season of Star Trek Discovery. Many have discussed on the internet lately if Star Trek Picard might even change the view on TNG, if maybe the magic has been extinguished by these events in Star Trek Picard. I can answer this question for me clearly with no. No, no, no. 999. I will have forgotten the events from this season again so fast that I can enjoy TNG in the future without thinking about this bullshit. I rate the last episode of the second season of Star Trek Picard with 1 out of 5 points. Franz, it's your part.
Thank you, Hans, for your detailed review. Thank you very much. And I'd like to talk a little bit more about the story, which in itself is to no point logical and conclusive. Corey remotely deletes all of Dr. Sung's data. Is there no offsite backup? But the file on Project Khan, of all things, lies printed out in a drawer. How pathetic. We are told to watch out for the butterfly effect all season long, yet you free an entire busload of prisoners. You murder a policeman, drive police cars and turn entire streets into rubble. Have Jurati murder an uninvolved bar patron. And at the very end you simply say to us, through the mouth of Captain Rios, I have captured all the butterflies, a phaser and a comm badge. That's it? What happened to all the Borg mercenaries, for example, the ones who got beamed into the walls of the chateau or lay dying in the vineyard? Were they turned into fruit juice? Or did the Borg Queen just take them away? If so, what about their relatives? Do they get a call from Dr. Evil's henchman agency and get a bouquet of flowers and everything is fine? And Wesley Crusher is like, it'll be fine. We just beam away again in the middle of the park. Star Trek Picard is not science fiction. Star Trek Picard is not even clever social criticism. Title and setting are just a clumsy pretext for an amateurish, almost polemic scheming that only has one message. The old man is to blame, with all of his instruments of power like the police and law enforcement, which, as the message goes in the second season, serve only two purposes: oppression of the poor and the preservation of power. How can it be that within the episode with the tasty car batteries, has the bar owner saying that if you call the police on a vandalism offense like breaking some windows, something cruel will happen to the delinquent? How can it be that we are told over and over again whether by the bloodstains on the FBI's interrogation table or even quite directly as a threat from Agent Mulder, that people are being mistreated by the legal system here. How can it be that even that you even very directly and openly imply that immigrants are made to disappear by the immigration authorities after 24 hours? TNG used to use the genre to ask big, challenging questions and present compelling what-if scenarios, raise difficult moral questions to us. Viewers themselves were involved in solving the mystery and could draw their own conclusions. It was a thought-provoking series about science, about philosophy, morality, the cosmos, and even oneself. If I wouldn't be reviewing this show on a weekly basis, I would not have thought about it for the days that followed after any of these episodes. The new Picard is overly sentimental and floats in a cloud of dark nostalgia, which the viewer is also obligated to dive into. His former strength as a leader, his pragmatism, have completely vanished. And not only in the character, even Patrick Stewart's performance has more of a reading from a teleprompter this season than something called acting. This, quite frankly, is not the Jean-Luc Picard I and we all fell in love with during the TNG era. In terms of dialogue and language, it's also broken down to petty and inappropriate sound bites. Rios gets control of those drones that can destroy the entire future of mankind and shouts, "Holy shit, I've got full control!" Oh! The crew encounters the new incarnation of the Borg, and Dr. Girardi exclaims delightedly, "Well, that's a new one." Oh well. It's only the most threatening thing the entire galaxy has ever seen. Best to let loose a horny line, you bitch. Those kind of one-liners fit better in the Marvel universe. What's left is pretty ridiculous bullshit disguised as profound insight. And the mood has tilted. This is superficial, fake critical nonsense, spiced with a large pinch of cliché. It has nothing to do with Star Trek, not even with generic entertainment. And for this season, the decline was in full effect by the 4th episode. Also from the perspective of, idiotic popcorn entertainment, it doesn't work. Because these 10 episodes are so incredibly full of logic flaws. You're constantly reminded of past glories without earning them, or that those memories really add anything to the story. It's outrageous, and it's in this shameless way, driven by the desire to be able to cut a cool trailer afterwards out of these episodes and show them to the audiences at conventions where the public then goes, woo, nothing more of substance. There were a few good ideas, a few good approaches this season, but that's it. It's all just superficial phrases, empty promises, and the dismantling of what once made Star Trek great. And so all that remains as a positive aspect for the season is the idea itself, the idea that it would be nice not to die alone. And the idea that one of our innermost wishes in life can come true, that we will not be forgotten if we sacrifice or give ourselves for others. And in that sense, the character Picard receives just that. In the final act, Q gives him the gift that he will not die alone, because he has signed him up for Tinder or something, because he doesn't even know if he's going to get together with Laris in the future. And in return, in the form of a hug, he also receives the same gift back from Picard. That's it. That is the quintessence of the 2nd season. And stupidly, it all happens in under 3 minutes at the end, and it couldn't be more implausible. Couldn't, by the way, the whole season have been prevented by Jurati just taking off her helmet a little bit earlier and then everyone going out for a delicious succulent Chinese meal with Q? Yeah, we have to talk about that. It's such a waste to abuse this beloved character for something like this. And this season also dismantles every single adventure that Picard and his crew have ever done in The Next Generation for me. Hans can look past that. I cannot. The romance with Dr. Crusher, the rescue of the Baku, Picard's resistance in captivity, his stand for Data against Bruce Maddox and Measure of a Man, and also his plea for justice in the drumhead. All of this washes away with this short season of Star Trek Picard. We find our highly valued better future in which people work to better themselves and others, not by hard work or an improved society, but with a suicidal hanged mother and what has to be the most absurd construction of a plot I've ever witnessed. This abomination of a Star Trek season gets 0 out of 5 points from the German perspective. Schämt euch, ihr Schweinehunde!
Thank you for your emotional conclusion, Franz. Yeah. I would like to point out the German perspective on Star Trek Strange New Worlds, which will also appear again in the next week.
Oh yeah, join us for the Strange New Worlds review next week from the German perspective, and thanks for joining us today. I hope you had a great night. See you next week. Comment, like, and subscribe, or the ghoul will get you. Take care, guys. Bye-bye.
Thank you.